Hello, this is me and my attempt to do a daily study. And one of the things that I want for these studies is for them to be just short, convenient ways to study some of the verses that maybe we don't get to on our Sunday full covering. And try to make it a little bit easier as well, just covering a small portion. And hopefully, you guys find it useful. So let's jump right into here. One of the things we didn't get to talk about this last Sunday was this story that came before Jesus fed the 5,000. Why was he heading into the wilderness? And we see here that after Jesus had sent his 12 out and they had preached and they had healed and everything, people started to wonder who this Jesus Christ was, and including the king of that region, the king of the Jerusalem region, Herod. And it says here, and King Herod heard of him, for his name was spread abroad by the 12 apostles. And he said that John the Baptist was risen from the dead, and therefore mighty works do show themselves in him, do show forth themselves in him. So Herod heard of the fame of Jesus, and he, not having known that John the Baptist actually baptized Jesus, assumed that this Jesus was John the Baptist reincarnated. Now, others said that it is Elias, and others said that it is a prophet or as one of the prophets. So they're trying to figure out who Jesus is in the grand scheme of things. But when Herod heard thereof, he said, It is John, whom I beheaded. He is risen from the dead. And Herod had a lot to fear here. And it kind of goes into this story inside these verses. For Herod himself had sent forth and laid hold upon John, and bound him in prison for Herodias' sake, his brother Philip's wife, for he had married her. So Herod was an immoral man, and he took his brother's wife. He was a homewrecker. He took his brother's wife, and John had spoken against this. In verse 18, it says, For John had said unto Herod, It is not lawful for thee to have thy brother's wife. And Herod viewed John as a prophet. He viewed him as a good and a just man, one that he should listen to. But Herodias, his wife, his ill-gotten wife, uh, had a lot evil to say about that. So therefore Herodias had quarrel against him for speaking the truth, and would have killed him, but she could not. For Herod feared John, knowing that he was a just man and an holy, and observed him. And when he heard him, he did many things and heard him gladly. In other words, Herod believed John. Herod believed that John was a just and a holy man. He listened to what he said, and he did many things that John said gladly. This is kind of an example of Christ's teaching when he says that the word falls on stony ground where there's not much root. So the fruit here you see blooming in Herod rapidly, but then because of persecution or the fear of what his wife is going to say, he chokes it out. It gets beaten down by the sun, and he rips it out of himself. And when a convenient day was come, that Herod on his birthday made a supper to his lords, high captains, and chief estates of Galilee. So they're talking about a party that Herod threw here that included a lot of the nobility of that region. And when the daughters of the said Herodias came in and danced and pleased Herod and them that sat with him, the king said unto the damsel, so she was very young. Jesus called the daughter of Jairus damsel when she was about 12. So we can assume that the daughter of Herodias, whose name was Salome, came in and she was very young. Ask of me whatsoever thou wilt, and I will give it thee. And he sware unto her, Whatsoever thou shalt ask of me, I will give it thee, unto the half of my kingdom. And she went forth and said unto her mother, What shall I ask? So we can see that really in this relationship, that it is Herodias who is the more evil of the group there. The daughter didn't know much of what she was doing. Herod, of course, he believed in John and he was happy to hear the word of John. And I imagine to a certain extent, he also regretted his actions after hearing that John had disapproved of that. And we can kind of see that Herod is more righteous than his wife in this matter because, as it says later, and she said, the head of John the Baptist. So Herodias said, I want the head of John the Baptist. Tell your father. Then I want the head of John the Baptist. And she came in straightway with haste unto the king, and asked, saying, I will that thou give me by and by, which means immediately, like right now. By and by has kind of changed its meaning over the years, but at this time when she says by and by, that means right now, immediately. In a charger, the head of John the Baptist. And the king was exceeding sorry. So he felt horrible that he had to do this, and he regretted having made this promise. And it says, yet for the oath's sake, and for the sakes of those which sat with him, so the nobility that were around that heard him make this promise, he would not reject her. And immediately the king sent an executioner and commanded his head to be brought. And he went and beheaded him in the prison, and brought his head in a charger, and gave it to the damsel, and the damsel gave it to her mother. And when the disciples heard of it, they came and took up his corpse and laid it in a tomb. And the apostles gathered themselves together unto Jesus, and told him all the things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And that's afterwards. So that's this story was occurring during the time in which Jesus had sent out his apostles, and the when the apostles came back, they told him what they had said and taught. Another way, inside the Matthew rendition of this story, it says that when Jesus had heard these things, so when Jesus heard these things before the feeding of the 5,000, then that prompted him in his kind of desert trek where the people started following him. Anyway, and so in this story, we kind of see kind of the tragic tale of Herod. Herod believed John the Baptist, and it says that he was happy to follow. It says he heard him gladly. He was happy to follow John the Baptist. He knew that he was a just man. He knew he was holy. And after he had killed him, this racked his soul to the point where when he heard of the wonderful things that Christ had done, instead of trying to come unto Christ, he feared Christ because he thought it was John the Baptist come to exact revenge for the evil that he had done. And we can also see what happens when an evil person has influence in your life. And this evil person can be somebody as important as your spouse. This can be somebody as innocuous as a workplace friend. When you give place for evil in your soul, then you will do evil things, even if you regret them, even if you don't want to. We see here, Herod, he made the mistake of trusting in his wife, his ill-gotten wife. He made the mistake of promising to his daughter kind of a blank check in which she referred to her mother. And so we see the evil influence here is that of Herodias, because Salome didn't even know what she was asking at that time. I imagine that Salome didn't go to listen to John at all. But we do see kind of what happens here when you allow evil influences in your life. And so kind of the lesson that we learn here, the moral of this particular story of Herod is try to be good in all your doings. Don't allow evil people around you. I don't know exactly everything that went into him taking Herodias as his wife. You can tell he was a homewrecker. He was an immoral man because John wouldn't have spoken against him taking Herodias to wife if the Herodias wasn't still married. If his brother Philip was uh, dead, then it would actually fall to Herod to marry Herodias. But evidently, a lot of stuff, there's a big story there that we don't really get more detail of inside the scriptures. But we do see what happened. We do see that when you build on a foundation of evil things, then even when you want to do good, you cannot do good. That way is stopped from you because here he painted himself into a corner. So definitely surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with the people who are going to uphold your beliefs and who are going to encourage you in your good things. He loved John. Like we can see, for Herod feared John. In other words, he respected John, knowing he was a just man and holy, and observed him. So even for all of his faults, Herod knew what goodness was, and he had found that in John, but it was already too late for him. Anyway, and those are some of the verses that we didn't get to. I hope to talk to you again tomorrow about some more that are inside these scriptures that we weren't able to review over this last time.